Welcome back. The U.S. economy is zipping ahead at a better than expected 3% growth rate in the second quarter under Trump. The government today also reported the GDP price index, the inflation rate, now around 2.1%. That is the Federal Reserve's target. But the Federal Reserve again did not cut interest rates today, keeping them at 20-year highs. This is a big controversy. Let's welcome back to the show the director of the National Economic Council at the White House. He's Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, it's great to see you again, sir.
Great to be back.
It's good to see you. What's your reaction to the Fed not cutting rates? Fed Chair Powell is still talking about inflation possibly coming from the Trump tariffs, but we know Fed Governors Bowman and Waller dissented against this. What's your take?
Right. Well, the bottom line is that there's great news today because we had a blockbuster GDP report that really blew through expectations, gave us 3% growth, which, by the way, we delivered in President Trump's first term as well, but 3% income growth and inflation only at 2.1%. This is how supply-side economics works, that if you have a big increase in supply, then you get lots of growth and you don't get inflation. Now, the problem with the Fed when we were there in the first term was that they kept thinking that the Trump tax cuts were going to cause inflation and were hiking rates, so they were wrong about that. And I think that right now, if you look at central banks around the world, they have an eye on where inflation is around the world that's quite different from the Fed's. And the Fed still, as Chairman Powell kept saying today, is obsessed on the idea that tariffs are going to cause inflation, but they've been saying that really since January, and it keeps not happening. And in today's GDP release, as you mentioned, only 2.1% inflation. And again, the inflation numbers, the consumer price index, have surprised on the downside in the sense of been good numbers, low inflation numbers, 5 months in a row. And so at some point, the idea that the tariffs are going to cause an explosion in inflation is something that people are going to have to give up. And if an independent Federal Reserve is data-driven and looking at the data, that our expectation is that they're going to recognize what the ECB has already recognized, that it's okay, it's safe now to cut rates.
Yeah, like a dozen central banks around the world are cutting rates. So does Fed Chair Powell get pushed out? Does he resign? Because Director Hassett, there are reports swirling around, you're one of the contenders to be the next Fed chair. Do you want the job? Would you accept it? Is there anything you can share about that?
We respect the independence of the Fed, and the thing I can say is that I just love the job that I'm in right now. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here in the White House and get to share with you that we have such a wonderful GDP release. And so, President Trump has announced that Secretary Bessent is going to lead a search on who the Fed chair might be, and I look forward to seeing what they say.
So we've got 9 more months to this. So let's move on to this. What was your reaction when you heard Senator Chuck Schumer claim that 3% GDP growth rate, which is good, he claims it's a mirage? I mean, we saw personal income growth come in at strong 3%. Consumer spending is up, but Schumer is saying all this is a mirage. What do you think?
Right. Well, first of all, what was a mirage was the economic growth under the Biden administration, where most of the growth was coming from runaway government spending. And the thing that's really interesting in this report is that government spending was way down. And in fact, so far this year, we've reduced federal employment by 70,000 people. And we've done that. And despite that, the classic Keynesian guys would say, oh, the multiplier for that's terrible, you're going to have a recession. Our GDP is growing at 3%. And so I think that it was a mirage in the past when the previous administration was jacking up the economy of government spending, but we're doing the reverse. But also, because I know that you love to dig into the numbers, there's actually a really, really good sign for the next quarter in this release, which is that the one negative, if you go through the fine details, is what Schumer was saying, that capital spending was down. But the capital spending that was down was basically, factory building. But we believe and have a high confidence after talking to people on the ground that people were pausing the new construction of factories, waiting for the big beautiful bill because they weren't, they wondered, I think, a little bit whether it'd be retroactive. But now that the bill's passed, they could go full speed ahead building factories, and they were waiting for the expensing of this. And that's why there was a little pause of this quarter. That's very much in the data. And so what that means is the explosion of factory construction is going to happen in the third quarter. And so therefore, if you think that we're running at a 3% pace right now, then we should be running at about a 4% pace next quarter.
The boom and reshoring of U.S. manufacturing is underway. We calculated something like more than 1 billion square feet of U.S. factory space added, I think, since 2022. So what is a Democrat answer to all of this? Because we know that the Fed keeping rates high means that there's $1 trillion more in taxpayer costs to servicing the U.S. debt. I mean, we don't hear any answers out of Chuck Schumer, any answer out of top Democrats about what their economic agenda is. What do you see that it is?
Well, I think their economic agenda is science denial. right? Like, so the fact is, we went back in 2017 and we put out reports where we said, this is what's going to happen to the economy. We're going to get 3% growth again. We're going to get more than a 10% increase in capital spending. And we did. The models worked. And we're using the same models now, and we're getting the same effect. And so I guess the question is, if you're going to just disregard the science for partisan purposes, you're not serving the American people. And how long can you get away with it? And I think if you look at the polls for the Democrats right now, the answer is the American people are tired of it. They learned what helps Americans be prosperous. They know that their wages went up by $6,400 when President Trump was here last time. They want the real wages to go up again rather than the huge drops they had during Bidenflation. And so the Democrats, I think, should stop being science deniers.
So what are the next trade deals coming? Because we know there's that August 1st deadline for more tariffs to be coming in at a higher rate. We know that there's action with India, Brazil. What trade deals do you see coming pretty quickly now?
Well, the president's going to decide that, but I think that what we're seeing is, first, looking back over the last couple of weeks, an unbelievable flurry of historic trade deals. You know, hats off to Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent and Jameson Greer and, of course, the quarterback of the team, President Trump, for getting Europe to open up their markets to our products so our farmers could sell stuff there and our factories could now sell stuff in Europe. And we did that with Japan, which everybody thought was impossible. And so I think that there have been an amazing number of big deals, and I think there'll be a few more. But don't forget that after the deadline, then the tariffs are going to go into effect for everybody else. And if they want to negotiate a better deal than the tariffs they get at the beginning of August, then I'm sure that people will be listening. Because what the goal of this is to get American products, to get their markets open to American products, and to basically get the tariff revenue to help balance the budget. And so President Trump's policy has been working, and I expect a few more deals, but then I expect negotiations to continue.
Yeah,
after
we'll be
that as
seeing
well.
if the tariffs are creating inflation. We're just waiting to see that data.
Yeah, when is that
National
gonna happen?
Director, Council Director Kevin Hassett, thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
with the Evening Edit tonight. It's good to see you.